We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
There's rumbling in the ranks of America's future vice president, whoever that may be. On today's special edition of Liberty Nation Radio, right here on the Radio America Network, we're going to be delving into the latest potential VP picks, what kind of legacy building they're going to do, the current state of the Supreme Court, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Let's get started. The stakes have never been higher for who presidential candidates choose for their number 2 on the ballot. To discuss the new entries into the race, the existing entries, we're joined by longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Hello, Mark. Good to be here, as always.
Tim, you are my go-to fount of all knowledge on political analysis. And I suggest I suggest everybody goes and reads your stuff over at LibertyNation.com. I wanted to get your take on a new contender, a new name that's being floated in the potential Trump VP stakes. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, well, it's somewhat close to home here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I'm glad you started with that because I think there are many people around here, in particular around the capital area of Virginia, Maryland, D.C., who realize that Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, is a rising star in the party. There's no question about it. He is someone who could probably check all the boxes for vice president. First of all, he's someone who could take the office on a moment's notice and not have a problem with the confidence of the American people. He has just the right sort of character to soften Trump in those areas that he needs the most help, which is independent suburban women or even moderate Democrat suburban women who are reluctant to vote for Trump. And I think he just gives you a sense of balance on the ticket. And to me, and I felt this for some time, but he was never mentioned until recently. It's always been my opinion that Glenn Youngkin would be the strongest single vice presidential choice for Donald Trump. And honestly, Mark, I don't think it's even close. And now, of course, there's all kinds of underlying factors. Nikki Haley would be a great choice, but we know that's not going to happen because of the personal relationship between the candidates and the fact that she's sort of from the different wing of the party. So there's a lot of reasons that alliances like these cannot be formed. But we know that Trump met recently with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. And we also know, importantly, that Trump has pulled it into a tie in the last 2 polls in Virginia. And this is a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points, in 2020. So this is a dramatic swing. And taking Youngkin could very possibly put Virginia in play. And if Trump wins Virginia, he wins the election. No question.
Yeah, it's not just the 13 electoral college votes that the Old Dominion has.
Well, the other thing is that Virginia has a unique law. I think it's the only one in the country, as a matter of fact, where a governor is limited to 1 consecutive term. In other words, you can serve 2, but not back to back. So Youngkin's leaving office in January of 25 anyway. So it would coincide perfectly, and nobody could say he was abandoning his commitment to the people of Virginia.
We should check out his Craigslist account, see if he's put up a job thing saying, looking for work, doesn't want to travel too far.
Right. That's the truth. Let's see, Richmond to Washington is about 2 hours.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close. Not for me in England. 2 hours, it's the other side of the country. But for Washingtonians and Virginians, yes. I'd actually like to come back on something you said about who else would be a good pick for Donald Trump? And you said Nikki Haley. Now, I can see why a lot of conservatives might want Nikki Haley, but I suspect that if Nikki Haley were his eventual choice, which she's not going to be, but that would put off a lot of his core base, right? Because Trump's
His
only
core base is not going to be put off by, I think, by whoever he picks as a VP, unless it's an out and out progressive. But this would be, look, it's not going to happen, but the reason it would be appealing is because suburban women love Nikki Haley. And because she's someone who could take over in a heartbeat. And in 1980, Ronald Reagan had a knockdown, drag out fight with George Bush for the Republican presidential nomination. He edged him out, beat him decisively, but George Bush was a strong second. He brought a constituency that Reagan needed to strengthen, which was the Eastern establishment Republicans. And George H.W. Bush was an establishment Republican above all else. And that worked. They consolidated the sort of two wings of the Republican Party and went on to a 45 state landslide victory over Jimmy Carter. So that's the logic behind bringing someone like Nikki Haley. Of course, the problem is that Trump will believe, whether it's true or not, and it likely would be that Nikki Haley would start running for president in 2028, the moment that she was selected. And that brings us to someone else, Doug Burgum, who may be high on the list, mostly because he doesn't have overwhelming presidential ambitions. And Trump doesn't want to pick someone who's immediately setting up a presidential campaign for 4 years later.
I think one of the most fascinating names that has been floated for the shortlist is J.D. Vance. And I've read his book, and I believe he's a very clear thinker, but he's a little bit different from either the establishment conservative wing and the MAGA wing, as in he's very much a union backer, I believe, which is not something you really associate with either side of that.
Well, that's because he's in Ohio.
Yeah.
He has to be at least moderately pro-union. But look, J.D. Vance, picking him would be to double down on the MAGA agenda. It would be saying, we need more cowbell.
Yeah.
We need more MAGA because, Trump has a pretty good relationship with unions as it is. Okay, he has the MAGA vote locked up. He has Ohio locked up. I don't see what J.D. Vance would give you electorally. I don't know if he would inspire confidence as a future president because he's still a young politician. He's
only a couple of years in the Senate as well.
Right. And so I don't really get what he would bring other than to use a crude term, would be to be essentially a sycophant for Trump and just expand his message so that he can be sending that same MAGA message in two places at once.
Yeah, I absolutely see your point there. It would very much be a re-echoing of the MAGA platform, which I perhaps disagree with you on the eventual outcome on that. Not that I think he'll actually get the slot, although I suspect he might, but that Trump might be looking, rather than for shoring up different areas of weakness or prospective areas of weakness within his national campaign, he might be looking more for what will happen after he leaves office, because we saw in 2021 when Joe Biden took office, it took all of 3.5 minutes to a week to dismantle so much of what Trump had managed. So I think that there could be that element going into it.
Well, that's why I think that Youngkin, again, coming back to Glenn Youngkin, he's a candidate that can unite the two wings. I've never heard a bad word about him, to be honest with you, Mark, from conservatives, MAGA people, whatever. He is a consensus rising star right of center, whether you want to call him conservative, MAGA, neoconservative, whatever. We don't know what he thinks about foreign policy. But I can't imagine that anybody would look at Glenn Youngkin and say, geez, he really swung and missed on this bet.
You might well be right on that, Tim. Now, we're going to take a short break. After the break, we're going to come back and we're going to be talking about legacies, where they go, what they're for, and who needs them. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.